The soft notes of the piano filled the air, delicate and deliberate, echoing through the high wooden beams of the renovated barn. Fairy lights twinkled above me, glowing like captured stars, casting a golden warmth over the guests who had gathered. My lace gown trailed lightly against the polished floor as I stood at the altar beside Daniel, his hand steady in mine, his eyes calm, reassuring. I should have felt complete joy in that moment, the moment I had imagined since I was a little girl, cutting out wedding dresses from magazines and daydreaming about walking down the aisle. Instead, an ache twisted in my chest like a knife. Because when I looked out at the crowd, I saw Daniel's family filling their rows, smiling, nodding, dabbing tears of joy. But on my side, the front row of seats sat empty. Empty where my parents should have been. Empty where my brother should have been. Empty where my family, my own flesh and blood, should have been. The contrast was jarring. Daniel's mother clutched a tissue, his father beamed with pride. His sister waved enthusiastically at me as if to say, "We're here, we've got you." And yet, just beside them, my side was a gaping void. The absence screamed louder than the music, louder than the whispers, louder than my own heartbeat. I had reserved those seats with such care, imagining my mother smoothing her dress, my father shifting nervously in his suit, my brother cracking a joke under his breath. But now, they sat like monuments to disappointment, silent reminders of promises broken long before this day. A vibration buzzed against my leg, sharp and intrusive. For a second, I thought I had imagined it, but no, the faint glow of my phone pulsed from the hidden pocket in my gown. I shifted slightly, careful not to draw attention, and glimpsed the screen. 36 missed calls, 14 new messages, all from Mom. The words blurred in my vision as tears threatened to spill. My throat tightened, but I swallowed hard, forcing composure. This was my wedding, the day I was supposed to stand tall, radiant, chosen, not the day I broke down under the weight of neglect that had followed me since childhood. I leaned closer to the bouquet in my trembling hands and whispered so quietly only I could hear, "They didn't come." And in that instant, with everyone watching, with Daniel's steady gaze fixed on me, I felt both the most celebrated bride in the world and the loneliest daughter alive. Growing up, I used to think families were supposed to be like the ones in movies. You know, the warm Sunday dinners, the proud parents cheering from the bleachers, the refrigerator plastered with children's drawings and report cards. For a long time, I believed mine was almost like that. Almost. But when I think back now, the word almost feels like a cruel joke. My brother Ryan was 3 years younger than me, and from the very beginning, it felt like the sun rose and set for him alone. He was the golden child, the center of every conversation, the star of every family gathering. Mom used to say, "Ryan just has that spark," as if I was nothing more than a shadow flickering in the corner. I remember one spring when I was in 5th grade. I had spent weeks preparing for the county science fair. I built a model showing how solar panels worked, complete with tiny circuits that lit up a miniature house. I was nervous but proud. When they called my name as the winner of first place, my chest swelled with something I had rarely felt: hope. Hope that maybe this time my parents would look at me the way they looked at Ryan. When I rushed home, medals still hanging around my neck, I found them in the backyard. They weren't waiting to congratulate me. No, they were grilling burgers, laughing with neighbors, and talking about how Ryan had scored a goal in his Pee-wee soccer game earlier that day. A goal in a game no one would remember by the next week. My medals sat on the counter all evening, untouched, unnoticed. That pattern became my life. Every achievement of mine was a whisper compared to Ryan's every stumble being treated like a triumph. If he brought home a C on a math test, Mom would smile and say, "At least you tried, sweetheart." If I brought home an A, she'd glance at it while stirring a pot of pasta and say, "That's good, Emily. Keep it up." No excitement, no pride, just a passing nod before turning the spotlight back to Ryan. The worst came during my high school graduation. I had worked harder than I thought possible, late nights, endless study sessions, a part-time job on the weekends. I graduated in the top 5% of my class, clutching my diploma like proof that I was worthy of something more than the scraps of their attention. I had reserved 3 seats for them, 3 seats that remained empty that entire ceremony. Afterward, while my classmates hugged their parents, posed for photos, and basked in the glow of family pride, I stared at my phone. There was a text waiting for me from Mom. "Sorry, honey, Ryan's football team made the playoffs. We couldn't miss it. You understand, right? We'll celebrate later." But later never came. That was the day something inside me shifted. I realized I could spend the rest of my life chasing their approval, or I could stop running in circles and build a life where my worth wasn't up for debate. So I stopped trying. I stopped calling home every week because every conversation ended with, "Guess what Ryan did this time?" I stopped sending them updates about my achievements in college. I learned to clap for myself, to surround myself with people who actually saw me. That's when Maya came into my life. We met during freshman orientation, both of us lost in a maze of campus buildings and schedules. She had a laugh that could cut through any anxiety, and within an hour, she felt like someone I had known for years. Where my parents dismissed my victories, Maya celebrated them like they were her own. When I got my first A on a grueling engineering exam, she dragged me out for ice cream. When I landed an internship, she posted a picture of me on her social media with the caption, "My best friend is going to change the world." Maya became the sister I never had, the one who showed up, who listened, who cared. She reminded me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose you. By the time I graduated college with honors, I had almost made peace with the idea that my parents would never be proud of me. But life has a funny way of giving you what you need when you least expect it. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party, just after I turned 26, that I met Daniel. He was tall, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a quiet confidence that drew people toward him without him even trying. I don't know why, but on our 3rd date, I found myself spilling everything about my family. The neglect, the favoritism, the way I still carried the ache of being invisible. I expected the polite nod, the awkward shift in conversation. Instead, Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. "That's not normal, Emily," he said, gently but firmly. "You deserve better than that. You deserve people who show up for you, no matter what." No one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever acknowledged that my pain was real, that I wasn't being dramatic or needy. Daniel didn't just listen. He validated me. He made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken. With him, I learned a new kind of love, one that didn't demand I compete for scraps of attention, one that didn't measure my worth against someone else's highlight reel. With him, I was enough. And for the first time in my life, I thought, maybe this is what family is supposed to feel like. When Daniel and I got engaged, it felt like the beginning of everything I had ever wanted. He proposed on a crisp autumn evening at the little park near our apartment, the kind where leaves carpet the ground in fiery reds and golds. I remember his hands trembling as he opened the box, his voice catching just slightly as he asked me to marry him. For the first time in my life, there was no hesitation in my answer, no doubt, no shadow of comparison, just a resounding yes that came straight from my soul. We told his parents that same night, and they reacted exactly the way I had always dreamed parents should. His mother squealed and hugged me so tightly I thought she might never let go. His father clapped Daniel on the back, his pride unmistakable. His sister Olivia immediately began making plans for bridal showers and shopping trips. I wasn't just marrying Daniel. I was being embraced into a family that wanted me. Telling my own family, however, was a different story. I called my mother the next morning, rehearsing the words in my head. "They'll be happy for me," I told myself. "Maybe this time will be different." "Mom," I began when she answered, "Daniel proposed last night. We're engaged." There was a pause. Too long, too heavy. Then her voice came, flat and restrained. "Oh, well, congratulations." That was it. No squeal, no rush of questions about the ring or the proposal. Just a hollow acknowledgement, followed almost instantly by, "Ryan has an interview coming up for that finance firm in the city. We're really hoping this is his big break." I forced a smile into the phone, though she couldn't see it. That's great, Mom. The conversation drifted back to Ryan, as it always did. By the end of the call, I wasn't sure if she even remembered why I had called in the first place. Still, I held on to hope. Weddings are supposed to bring families together. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment they finally showed up for me. At the same time, something else was growing in my life, my cafe. For years, I had dreamed of owning a small place where people could come for fresh pastries, strong coffee, and a sense of community. After months of planning, saving, and more than a few sleepless nights, I signed the lease on a little storefront with big windows that flooded the room with morning light. Daniel supported me every step of the way, helping me paint walls, assemble furniture, and test recipes late into the night. Maya was there too, her laughter filling the empty space as we worked, reminding me that I wasn't doing this alone. When opening day finally came, I sent invitations to everyone I loved. My parents, of course, were at the top of the list. I imagined them walking through the doors, pride shining in their eyes as they saw what I had built with my own hands. But the morning of the launch, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "So sorry, honey, we can't make it today. Ryan has another job fair, and he needs us to drive him. You understand, right?" The words blurred as I read them. I had poured every ounce of myself into this cafe, and they couldn't be bothered to show up, not even for an hour. Instead, they were once again chasing Ryan's next maybe, his next chance, his next big break. I plastered on a smile for my customers, for the local press who came to write a feature, for Maya and Daniel who cheered me on as if I had opened a 5-star restaurant. But inside, the emptiness gnawed at me. My parents couldn't even see me when I was standing in the brightest light of my life. As weeks passed, the wedding planning began in earnest. Daniel and I chose a rustic venue just outside of town, a renovated barn strung with lights, surrounded by fields that would be lush and green come spring. We picked a date 6 months away, careful to give everyone time to prepare. When I told my parents, my mother's voice was cautious. 6 months? That's awfully soon, Emily. Don't you think you're rushing things? It feels right, I insisted. Daniel and I want this. "Well, I suppose we'll make it work," she said vaguely, before adding, "Ryan's been talking about starting something big too, maybe his own business. We'll have to see what's happening around then." Her words stung. My wedding day, the moment I had waited for my entire life, was already being weighed against the possibility of Ryan's next venture. Still, I refused to give up hope. I sent them invitations, called to remind them about fittings and rehearsals, asked my father if he would do the traditional father-daughter dance. Each time, the answers were uncertain, distracted, half-hearted. But I clung to the image I carried in my heart, my family sitting in the front row, smiling at me as I walked down the aisle. I wanted to believe that when the day finally came, they would set aside everything else and show up for me. Not for Ryan, not for anyone else, but for me. Because weddings are about family, aren't they? About love and unity and celebration. And no matter how many times they had let me down before, a part of me still believed that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was sitting in my cafe, going over final seating charts with Maya, when a notification popped up on my phone. Ryan had posted on social media. Normally, I scrolled past his constant updates, selfies at bars, vague captions about big things coming, pictures of him in new suits my parents probably paid for. But this one made me freeze. It was a glossy flyer. Ryan Carter Presents, the grand launch of Carter Consulting. Date, the exact same day as my wedding. Time, 5 p.m., just an hour after my ceremony was scheduled to begin. Venue, a downtown hotel ballroom. The caption read, "The beginning of a legacy. Thanks to Mom and Dad for believing in me. Couldn't have done it without you." My heart sank. My parents weren't just aware of this, they were funding it. I stared at the screen, numb, while Maya read over my shoulder. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. "The same day? That can't be an accident." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Ryan had always found a way to steal the spotlight, and my parents had always let him. Still, this was different. This wasn't missing a graduation or skipping a birthday. This was my wedding. That night, I called my mother, my hands shaking as the phone rang. Mom, what is this about Ryan's launch party? It's on the same day as my wedding. She hesitated for a beat, then sighed. Yes, honey, we wanted to surprise you. Ryan has been working so hard, and this is such an important opportunity for him. The venue was only available that weekend. Mom, it's my wedding day. We booked our venue 6 months ago. Her voice turned sharp, almost impatient. Emily, your wedding is just one day. Ryan's future depends on this. Don't you think it's a little selfish to expect everyone to rearrange everything for you? Selfish. That word sliced through me like glass. I could barely form a reply. I'm your daughter. This is supposed to be one of the most important days of my life. Can't you see how much this hurts? Ryan needs us right now, she said firmly. You'll have Daniel's family there. You'll be fine. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in silence for a long time, the phone still clutched in my hand, my chest hollow. No matter how many times they had disappointed me, a part of me had clung to the belief that my wedding would finally be different. But I was wrong. The days that followed were a blur of wedding preparations shadowed by dread. Each time I called home, I was met with vague promises. We'll try to come for part of it, or maybe we can stop by the ceremony before heading downtown. As if my wedding were some optional errand, something to squeeze in between more important obligations. And then there was Maya. At first, she was as outraged as I was. She listened to me rant late into the night, cursed Ryan's name, and reassured me that she would be by my side no matter what. But then she began pulling away. She missed a dress fitting, claiming she had to work late. She skipped a planning meeting, saying she wasn't feeling well. When I texted her, the replies came hours later, short and distracted. Finally, one evening, I confronted her. Maya, what's going on? You're my maid of honor. You promised you'd be here for me. Her eyes darted away. Emily, I don't know if I can do this. Ryan told me you were thinking of asking Olivia to replace me, that maybe you only picked me because you felt obligated. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Maya, that's not true. I would never replace you. You're my best friend. She bit her lip. But he showed me texts, messages from you, saying you didn't think I was up to it, that Olivia would be a better fit. My head spun. Maya, those are lies. I never sent anything like that. You know me, don't you? Her silence was answer enough. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Losing my parents' support was devastating, but losing Maya's trust, that cut deeper. She was supposed to be the sister I never had, the one person who always believed me. And now, even she was slipping away, tangled in Ryan's web of manipulation. When the rehearsal day finally arrived, I still clung to a fragile thread of hope. Maybe, against all odds, my parents would walk through the doors. Maybe Maya would show up after all. Daniel's family filled the venue, buzzing with excitement, their joy contagious. His father practiced walking me down the aisle, his sister snapped photos of every moment, his mother fussed over my dress. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, except for the empty chairs on my side. We waited until the last possible moment before starting. My heart leapt at every sound, every creak of the door, every whisper of movement outside. But my family never came. Not my mother, not my father, not Ryan, and not Maya. As I stood at the altar during the rehearsal, staring at the vacant seats reserved for the people who were supposed to love me most, I felt the truth settle like a stone in my chest. They had chosen him again. They always would. The morning of my wedding should have been filled with excitement. Instead, I woke up with a knot in my stomach so tight it felt like I could hardly breathe. Allison, one of my college friends who had flown in the night before, was the one helping me get ready. Not Maya, not my mother, not my sister, because I didn't have one. Just Allison, cheerfully pinning my hair and making bad jokes to keep me from crying. She had no idea how much her presence meant. By the time I slipped into my gown, I almost convinced myself I could hold it together. I told myself it didn't matter who wasn't there. What mattered was Daniel. What mattered was the life we were starting together. But when the coordinator tapped on the door and said, "It's time," my hands began to tremble. I peeked through the small side window of the barn. Guests were taking their seats, their laughter and chatter filling the air, the string quartet beginning to play softly. Daniel stood at the altar, shoulders squared, expression a mixture of nerves and love. His family filled their rows completely, leaning toward each other, whispering, beaming. And then, my side. Row after row sat nearly empty. The front seats, the ones I had reserved for my parents, for my brother, for Maya, were bare. The ivory programs I had placed on each chair looked like abandoned reminders that no one had come. It hit me then harder than it ever had before. They weren't coming, not even for this. I felt my knees weaken. For a moment, I thought I might actually collapse right there in the waiting room, ruin my dress, ruin everything. But then a knock at the door pulled me back. It was Robert, Daniel's father, standing in his tuxedo, his expression soft. "Emily," he said gently, offering his arm, "if you'd like, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Just tears, hot, unrelenting tears that blurred everything. He didn't flinch. He just stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You are already family to us. Today just makes it official." Something inside me cracked then, the hurt, the grief, the longing for what I would never have. But beneath it, a flicker of gratitude sparked. Maybe I didn't have the family I was born into, but I had the family I chose. I nodded, slipped my arm into his, and whispered, "Thank you." The music swelled, the doors opened, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. The sunlight streamed in through the barn doors, catching on the lace of my dress, making the whole room glow. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, but all I could see were the empty seats waiting like ghosts at the front. Each step felt heavier than the last. The bouquet trembled in my hands. Guests smiled at me, but their faces blurred through my tears. I tried to focus on Daniel, standing at the altar, his eyes fixed on me with such love that it almost undid me completely. Almost. But then my gaze flicked, just for a second, back to those chairs. Empty. Still empty. Not my mother smoothing her skirt, not my father blinking back tears, not my brother flashing his careless grin, not even Maya, who had once sworn she would be beside me no matter what. The pain of it surged through me like fire. I was walking down the aisle to the man I loved, but I had never felt so abandoned, so disposable in my entire life. Halfway down, Robert gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. It steadied me, just enough to keep going. My breath hitched, my chin wobbled, but I lifted my head and forced myself to look forward. Daniel's face saved me. His eyes shone, wet but steady, his lips parting in awe as if he were seeing me for the first time all over again. In that moment, it was as if he was silently telling me, "I'm here. I'll always be here. You'll never walk alone again." When we reached the altar, Robert placed my hand in Daniel's with a quiet, "Take care of her." Daniel squeezed my fingers so tightly it almost hurt, but I welcomed it. I needed to feel anchored, needed to know I wasn't going to float away in the storm of grief and anger raging inside me. "You look incredible," he whispered, his voice shaking. I managed a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Thank you." The ceremony began. I heard the officiant's words, but they felt far away, muffled under the roar of my thoughts. Every vow I'd repeated, every promise I spoke, was layered with the knowledge of who wasn't there to hear them. The ache pressed against my ribs, heavy and suffocating. But then came Daniel's vows. "Emily," he said, his voice clear and sure, "I promise you will never have to fight for love in our home. I promise your victories will always be celebrated. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to remind you of your worth when the world tries to make you forget." His words broke me open. For the first time all day, I cried not from sorrow, but from something softer. The realization that maybe I didn't need the approval I'd been chasing all my life. Maybe I already had everything I needed, standing right in front of me. The applause rang out as we were pronounced husband and wife. Daniel kissed me, and the crowd cheered. But even in that rush of joy, even in that kiss, the image of those empty seats seared itself into my heart. A reminder that love and absence can coexist, that joy can ache, and that sometimes, even on the happiest day of your life, the deepest wounds still bleed. The reception was everything a wedding reception should be, on the surface. The hall glowed with string lights, laughter and music filled the air, and the scent of lilacs drifted from the centerpieces we had chosen months earlier. Guests clinked glasses, toasted to love, and Daniel's relatives danced with a joy that was infectious. From the outside, it must have looked perfect. But inside, a quiet hollowness clung to me. No matter how many times I smiled for photographs or swayed in Daniel's arms to our first dance, I could still feel the sting of those empty chairs. It was as if they haunted the room, reminders of the people who had chosen not to stand with me on the most important day of my life. We were halfway through cutting the cake when I felt the faint buzz of my phone against the pocket sewn discreetly into my gown. I had given it to Allison earlier, but she'd returned it to me after cocktail hour, just in case. At first, I thought it was another wedding day well-wisher, someone who couldn't attend but wanted to send their love. But when I glanced at the screen, my breath caught. 20 missed calls, 10 unread messages, all from Mom. Before I could even process it, the phone vibrated again, another call. Daniel noticed my face pale. "What is it?" he whispered, handing me a forkful of cake. "My mom," I murmured. "She's been calling all night." He frowned. "Emily, they made their choice. Don't let them ruin this moment too." Part of me wanted to agree, to shove the phone back into my dress and lose myself in the celebration. But another part, the part that still clung to a shred of hope that one day my family might finally choose me, whispered louder. "What if it's serious?" "I'll just step outside," I told him softly. 2 minutes. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll be right here when you come back." I slipped into the garden outside the reception hall, the cool night air brushing against my skin. My hands shook as I pressed the callback button. Mom answered on the first ring. Her voice was frantic, broken. "Emily? Oh, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours." I leaned against a wooden bench, heart hammering. "What's going on, Mom? I'm in the middle of my wedding. You know, the one you didn't come to." Her breath hitched. "Emily, it's Ryan. His launch party, it's falling apart. Patrick, his business partner, just exposed everything, all the lies, all the things he did to you." The words tangled in my mind. "What do you mean lies? What are you talking about?" She hesitated, then spilled everything in a rush. "Ryan told us you didn't want us at your wedding. He showed us texts, fake ones, I realize now, where you said you wanted a private ceremony, that you didn't consider us part of your life anymore. He said you were embarrassed by us, that you'd rather celebrate only with Daniel's family." I sank onto the bench, my hand covering my mouth. "What? Mom, I never said any of that. I begged you to come. I left voicemails, texts. I know," she cried. "I know now. He deleted your real messages, intercepted the invitations. He made it all look real. Emily, we believed him. We thought you wanted nothing to do with us." My stomach twisted. The betrayal wasn't just in their absence. It was in the ease with which they had believed I would cut them out. "And Maya?" I whispered, dreading the answer. "Why did she turn on me?" Another pause, heavier this time. My father's voice cut in over the speaker. "Ryan told her you'd replaced her as maid of honor. He showed her fake texts from you, saying she was never really your choice, that you only picked her out of pity. He convinced her it would be less humiliating to show up for him instead." My chest constricted. I thought of Maya's hurt face, her silence when I denied Ryan's story. She had believed him. She had believed him over me. Mom's voice wavered again. "Tonight at the launch party, one of Ryan's colleagues confronted him, asked why he scheduled the event on the same day as your wedding. Ryan made some snide comment about finally being the center of attention, and Patrick pressed harder. Ryan broke down and admitted it. The fake texts, the emails, all of it. Patrick called off their partnership on the spot. People left. The entire party collapsed in front of him. I sat in silence, the enormity of it pressing down on me. My own brother, my flesh and blood, had sabotaged the most important day of my life with calculated lies. And my parents, instead of questioning him, had believed every word. "Emily," Mom whispered, "we are so sorry. We failed you. We let him poison everything. Please, please understand. We thought we were doing the right thing. I let out a hollow laugh, though it sounded more like a sob. The right thing? You abandoned me on my wedding day because Ryan told you some story and you believed him without even asking me. We should have called you directly, Dad admitted. We should have known better. But Emily, we want to make it right. Please, can we see you? Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you'll allow it. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The hurt was too big, too raw. I thought of the empty chairs, of Robert walking me down the aisle because my father had chosen Ryan instead. I thought of the tears I had swallowed all day just to get through the ceremony. Finally, I whispered, "We'll be back at the hotel tonight. If you want to talk, you can meet us there. But I don't know what you expect me to say." I hung up before they could respond. When I returned to the reception, Daniel was waiting by the door, concern etched across his face. "Emily, what happened?" I looked at him, at the man who had promised me I'd never have to fight for love again, and my eyes burned. "It was Ryan," I said hoarsely. "He lied. About everything. He's the reason they weren't here." Daniel's jaw tightened, fury flickering in his eyes. What did he do? I told him everything. The fake messages, the sabotaged invitations, the lies to Maya. Each word felt like salt in an open wound, but also like pulling poison from a festering cut. When I finished, Daniel pulled me close, his voice steady. "Emily, listen to me. What he did says everything about him and nothing about you. You didn't lose your family. He stole them from you. But you have me, you have us, and we'll face whatever comes next together." For the first time that day, I let myself lean fully into his embrace. The night still ached with betrayal, but now I knew the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was, meant I wasn't crazy, I wasn't unlovable, and I wasn't forgotten. I had been lied about, manipulated, betrayed, but I had also been chosen. Chosen by Daniel, by his family, by the people who had shown up. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something stronger than the lies Ryan had built. The morning after the wedding, I woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and the quiet hum of Daniel's steady breathing beside me. For a moment, I allowed myself to pretend everything was perfect, that the empty seats, the lies, the betrayal were just a bad dream. But reality pressed in quickly. My parents were waiting in the lobby. Daniel offered to come with me, but I shook my head. "I need to do this alone," I said, though the thought made my stomach twist. When I entered the lounge, they were already on their feet. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, Dad looked older than I remembered, and both of them seemed smaller somehow, like the weight of the truth had finally settled on their shoulders. "Emily," Mom began, her voice trembling, "we are so sorry. We failed you in ways we can never undo." I stayed standing, arms folded. "You didn't just fail me yesterday. You failed me my whole life." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know. We always put Ryan first. We told ourselves it was because he needed more guidance, more attention. But the truth is, it was easier. You didn't demand anything from us. You were strong, independent. We convinced ourselves that meant you didn't need us." Dad cleared his throat, his voice low. "And we were cowards. Every time you shone, instead of celebrating you, we looked away, because it forced us to face how unevenly we treated our children. It was wrong, Emily. We see that now." For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words, but standing there, I realized apologies weren't enough. "I don't want excuses," I said firmly. "If you really want a relationship with me, it's going to take more than sorry. I need accountability. I need therapy, not just for Ryan, but for both of you. You need to face the damage you caused. And until that happens, I'm keeping my distance." They nodded, both of them visibly shaken but earnest. For the first time, they didn't argue, didn't defend themselves, didn't pivot back to Ryan. "Whatever it takes," Mom whispered. As for Ryan, he didn't show up. Word spread quickly that after his launch party imploded, he'd gone dark. No calls, no social media, nothing. At first, I assumed he was licking his wounds, waiting for the next chance to twist the narrative. But weeks later, Mom told me he had finally agreed to therapy. His lies had cost him not just me, but investors, colleagues, even friends who had once idolized him. For the first time in his life, there were consequences he couldn't charm his way out of. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard, just tired. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I silently hoped he would finally confront the emptiness that drove him to tear everyone else down. Maya reached out a month after the wedding. Her message was long, scattered with apologies, regret, and disbelief at her own naivety. I should have trusted you. I should have known Ryan was lying. I can't believe I let him poison our friendship. I hate myself for it. Please, Emily, if there's any way back, I want to try. We met at a small cafe, not mine, neutral ground. When she walked in, her face was blotchy from crying. Emily, she said immediately, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I let him convince me you didn't want me by your side. I should have known better. I studied her for a long time. This was the friend who had once been like a sister to me, the friend who abandoned me on the day I needed her most. I needed you, I said softly, my voice shaking, and you weren't there. That hurt more than I can explain. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know, and I'll never stop regretting it. We sat there for hours, talking, crying, sifting through the rubble of our friendship. In the end, I forgave her, but forgiveness didn't erase the cracks. We rebuilt slowly, brick by brick, but something essential was gone. Our friendship continued, but it would never be quite the same. Through it all, Daniel's family became my anchor. His mother called me every week, not to gossip or ask about Ryan, but to simply ask how I was doing. His father took to dropping by the cafe on slow afternoons, sipping coffee and telling me stories from his youth. Olivia became the sister I never had, dragging me along to family outings and texting me daily. They didn't try to replace what I had lost. Instead, they showed me what I had been missing all along: unconditional love. Months passed. My parents began therapy, tentatively inviting me into sessions. Some were painful, unearthing memories I had buried for years. Others brought clarity. Slowly, they started to see me, not as the background character in Ryan's story, but as their daughter, their equal. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and wounds don't vanish with apologies. But for the first time in my life, I felt like the door to healing was open. One evening, Daniel and I sat on the porch of our little house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. He slipped his arm around me and kissed the top of my head. You did it, he said quietly. Did what? I asked. Broke the cycle. You stood up to them. You demanded better. You chose yourself. I thought about that for a long moment, the ache of the past still present, but softened by the warmth of the future beside me. Maybe he was right. Maybe for the first time, I wasn't defined by who showed up or who didn't. Maybe at last, I was free. 6 months later, the cafe glowed with soft candlelight, the air filled with the scent of roasted herbs and warm bread. The tables had been pushed together to make one long family-style arrangement, covered with mismatched plates and flowers I'd gathered that morning from the farmer's market. It wasn't a grand event, just a dinner, a gathering of the people who mattered most. Yet as I looked around the room, I realized it felt more significant than any banquet hall ever could. Daniel's family filled one side, talking over each other, laughing with their usual ease. Robert was telling a story about teaching Daniel how to change a tire when he was 12, while Olivia interrupted with corrections every few sentences. His mother caught my eye across the table, smiling with that steady warmth I'd come to treasure. On the other side sat my parents. They looked smaller somehow, humbled. Therapy had been hard for them. I could see it in the way they chose their words carefully now, in the way they paused to listen before speaking. They hadn't asked for forgiveness all at once. Instead, they showed up quietly, consistently, taking responsibility piece by piece. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't healed, but it was something. And for the first time, I believed it could be enough. Ryan's chair was empty. He hadn't come tonight, and truthfully, I hadn't expected him to. Mom said he'd finally committed to a long-term program, somewhere far from here. I didn't know if I would ever fully let him back into my life, but I prayed, silently, that maybe someday he would find a way to be better, for himself, if not for us. The clinking of glasses drew my attention back to the table. Daniel had stood up, raising his cup of sparkling cider. "To new beginnings," he said simply, his eyes finding mine. A chorus of "to new beginnings" echoed around the room, and I felt a swell of gratitude so deep it nearly overwhelmed me. After dinner, I moved through the cafe with a tray of desserts: chocolate tarts, lemon squares, slices of my favorite vanilla bean cheesecake. Laughter and conversation filled the room, and for once, I didn't feel the urge to shrink into the background. I belonged here. As I set the last plate down, a small flutter in my belly made me pause. My hand instinctively went to rest against the curve just beginning to show beneath my dress. It wasn't a secret anymore. Our family knew, our friends knew. But every time I felt it, a mix of awe and protectiveness surged through me. I caught Daniel's eye. He smiled knowingly, his gaze dropping to my hand before returning to my face. There was pride there, but also something softer, steadier, a promise. I thought of my own childhood then, the empty seats at school plays, the forgotten ceremonies, the way I had learned to make myself smaller so Ryan's shadow could stretch wider. I thought of the ache that had lived in me for years, the hunger for approval that never came. And I vowed, right there in the center of my cafe, surrounded by the family I had built and the family I was slowly rebuilding, that my child would never feel what I felt. They would know they were seen. They would know they were celebrated. They would know that love wasn't conditional or something to be earned. It was a birthright. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the hum of voices and laughter wrap around me like a blanket. The past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. When I opened them again, Daniel was beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" he whispered. I leaned into him, smiling. More than okay. The night stretched on, filled with warmth, stories, and the clinking of forks against plates. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt whole. Not because every wound was healed, not because every wrong had been made right, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone else to give me the love I deserved. I had created it. I had chosen it. And as I stood in the glow of my cafe, my hand resting protectively over the life growing inside me, I knew this was only the beginning.